Planning to hold a massive drill involving nuclear force this weekend as tensions mount over Ukraine. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres argues threats to global security are higher now than during the Cold War as the Munich Security Conference discusses the crisis.
Shelling is intensifying along the Russia-Ukraine border as the threat of invasion looms. Russia's buildup of troops has been described as the most significant since the Second World War.
North America correspondent Jade McMillan joins us now from Washington for more on this. Jade, just take us through what the latest warnings are from the US.
Well, the United States has revised its estimate of the number of Russian troops threatening Ukraine. It says that figure could now be as high as 190,000. That includes troops gathered near the Ukrainian border and in Belarus, as well as taking into account Russian-backed separatists in the Donbas region in Ukraine's east. Overall, the US argues that this is the most significant military mobilisation in Europe since the Second World War. Now, increased shelling in the Donbas region has intensified Western fears of a Russian attack. This is an area that has been the site of conflict between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian rebels since 2014, but that activity has really stepped up in the past couple of days, both sides blaming each other for the shelling of a local kindergarten. And now there are reports that separatists are evacuating residents from the area, warning that Ukraine could be about to launch an offensive there. That is something that Ukraine denies. Now, the United States has been warning for some time now of the potential for a so-called false flag operation, Russia basically fabricating a reason to attack Ukraine. And the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has warned that the events of the past couple of days could be part of that playbook.
We are doing everything we possibly can to make clear that there's a diplomatic path, that this has to be resolved. The differences have to be resolved through dialogue, through diplomacy. We are deeply concerned that that is not the path that Russia has embarked on, and that everything that we're seeing, including what you've described in the last 24, 48 hours, is part of a scenario that is already in play of creating false provocations.
So, Jade, as tensions have been rising, we've seen talks between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin. We've seen talks with Emmanuel Macron as well. Is there still a chance for diplomacy at this stage?
Well, we heard Antony Blinken there sounding less optimistic of the chance of a diplomatic breakthrough here, but these talks are ongoing, both between Western leaders and also with Russia. A conversation has been scheduled between Secretary Blinken and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov for next week. The US President Joe Biden is understood to be speaking at the moment with NATO allies to discuss the situation, and he's expected to provide a public update later on this morning, Australian time. In the meantime, we've also just heard from a number of White House officials. They have publicly accused Russia of being responsible for a number of cyber attacks on Ukraine this week, and they've again repeated warnings that we've been hearing for a long time now that Russia would face unprecedented economic consequences if it attacks Ukraine.
Right, Jade McMillan there in Washington. Thank you.
Secretary-General of the United Nations says threats to global security are higher now than during the Cold War as the Munich Security Conference discusses the crisis in Ukraine. NATO and the United States are warning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine is imminent. Russia is conducting more war games this weekend involving its nuclear forces. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says the risk of miscommunication and miscalculation is higher today than before.
I'm often asked whether we are in a new Cold War. My answer is that the threat to global security now is more complex and probably higher than at that time. During much of the Cold War, there were mechanisms that enabled the protagonists to calculate risks and use back channels to prevent crises. Today, many of those systems no longer exist.
A warning siren has sounded in the eastern Ukrainian city of Donetsk after a Russian-backed separatist leader announced the evacuation of residents to Russia. The head of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic made the announcement on social media and said Russia has agreed to take in whoever wanted to leave.